Maryellen and
And I'm Bob Keeling.
Welcome
to the Airbrush Institute. We have set up a virtual classroom
where we will be discussing various airbrushing topics. Hi, your virtual classroom is now in session. Today we're going to be talking about cleaning your airbrush. We have many different styles of airbrushes, again, as always, but what we wanted to show you is that each of them have different nozzle heads, so that they're going to be different to clean. We're going to try to show you all of the different versions that you'll be able to apply it to whichever airbrush that you have. The first one we have is you're taking off this is the crown, this is the nozzle cap, and then we're doing the nozzle head. And you take the nozzle head off. On this style, you have a nozzle that disconnects. Okay, so that's going to be a different way to clean. If you're doing this one, take the nozzle head off. It's all self-contained. That nozzle does not come off. It stays inside. And the other style is that the nozzle head does not disconnect. So it's all one piece, and the only thing that you're going to be able to do is to change the nozzle. And that's just attached at the very tip here. So you can get in there with the little wrench that comes with the airbrush and be able to take that nozzle off. But you will not be able to take the head off. So we're going to cover all three of those styles of cleaning your airbrush. Bob is going to talk to you about the different things that you need to have handy when you start your cleaning process.
Some of the items that you can get is these dental picks, which come in different sizes. This one's a little bit more coarse, this one's a little bit finer. And these are really good to get down into the small crevices and get all the little contaminations out, and that way you have a nice clean gun. Another thing that you can use...
They fit really nicely into the nozzles, right?
Oh yes, definitely. That's the best place. And then they have Q-tips that you can use. These things are good. They're a little bit bulky, but you can take them and like twist them and form them into a smaller, tighter thing, and you'll be able to get...
Especially when wet. You can
wet them like that, and then you can just kind of twist them, and then they can get into the small areas as well. You can also use a paintbrush to get into the bowl and clean at the bottom of the bowl of your paint. We also have an assortment of different size wire brushes that can go into the areas and get out the stubborn little pieces. And to get the head off of it, each manufacturer of your airbrush has these little tools that will work to be able to get the head part of it off. And if the real stubborn ones, then you can also use these pliers. But what I would do is put a piece of tape here and here, and so that way you're not scarring up the nice chrome. The other items that you can use is these little baby wipes. You can get them down at your store, and they're easy to get, and they're nice and moist, so they'll be able to twist and go into those spaces as well.
They're fragrance free, and there's no alcohol or any of the waxy stuff in it, so wet ones work well also.
Yep. Okay, now to clean a brush, this particular brush, we first start off by, this is a gravity fed, and the paint will basically just stay in this region right here. So we do not want to work in this area really at all, because no paint's going to be coming into this particular area.
Because of this kind of airbrush, this style of airbrush?
Yes.
Okay.
And so if we're going to first start off with the crown cap. The crown cap is just a nice little cover that is going to protect the needle, because it sticks out just a little bit right there. And so they all come with this. A lot of airbrushers take them off and use it without it. You can do that, but just be careful as a rookie. You might end up bending your needle, because all you have to do is just drop it for a second, and that needle that's sticking out will end up getting bent, and then you have to get a new one.
Be wary of your hose.
Yes, because if you trip over your hose, this thing's going off your counter, and next you know it lands on the floor and you have a bent needle, so that's no fun. All right, so the next thing is your nozzle cap. And this piece here, this is basically a collector for your air, and it brings the air to here, which draws out your paint. Normally there's no paint inside this, but on the tip you'll get a lot of overspray. that'll happen. So you want to clean it anyway. Just use a swab or something with some water if you're using water soluble paints. And the next part is the nozzle, is the head cap. And this head cap here sometimes is a little stubborn, and every single airbrush usually comes, the manufacturer gives you a tool, a little wrench to be able to put on here and take off. And so you can use that to take it off. And I usually don't use that to put it back on because you don't want to over tighten these things.
Can you use a set of pliers? You
could, yes, but I would definitely put a piece of tape on the inside pieces here, so that way you don't have to worry about ruining your chrome finish on that. And the next piece is the nozzle. The nozzle usually sits in here nice and snug, and if it doesn't just come out like this one started to, you can take it and just twist it a little bit. It's just a snug fit. There's no screwing in or anything like that. And that'll pop on out that way. And then the next thing that you want to do is take off the back cover here. If you slide this off, loosen your chuck, and you want to take your needle and push it forward. You never want to drag it out because then you're dragging your paint all the way through this. So you want to drag it forward and put it to the side. And so now we've already run some water through here a couple times just to clean it out, but you want to take a water source and pour some water in here, or what I would like to do is to grab your cup, and spray some water into this and let it clean out any leftover particles of paint that might be in there. You can then take your swab, and what I like to do is take a swab and go down into the bottom of the bowl because the paint will collect down there. And so you're going to just kind of take it, twist it, and force it down in there. You can't hurt anything because it's just all metal. And you're going to clean that really, really well. You can also take the swab and maybe pinch it a little bit. Once it's wet, it'll give it a nice shape, a pointy shape like that. And you can stick it in here and also twist it and clean that area out. And that should get most, if not all, of your paint out of that area. Maybe rinse it one more time if need be, but you should be good at this point. So now the next thing to do is to clean your needle. And so to clean your needle, all you need to do is just take a little piece of paper towel, get it a little damp, and then just kind of run it like this and get all your particles out. You'll get some buildup around here, but you should be able to clean it off really well. And put that to the side. I usually take that same wet paper towel, clean off the head, the crown cap, the head of that, and the nozzle, the cap, and clean all these pieces off. You can also use baby wipes. Baby wipes work real good. Anything that has a little bit of moisture on it, they'll be able to take this stuff off of it. So once you clean all these pieces, the last one that you have left now is your nozzle. And so with the nozzle, there's always paint inside this thing, and it goes down to a nice little funnel to a point, so it's kind of hard to get some of that stuff out of there. So again, what I like to do is just take a little bit of water, put it on your paper towel, give it a little bit of a twist, and stick this in here and twist it a little bit until it's all the way up in there. And now you're cleaning the inside of your walls of your nozzle. You pull it out, you'll see some contamination in there. It'll clean it. You can do this 2 or 3 times and get it nice and clean. That's the best way I've found to clean that. And now you have all your pieces all clean. Now it just needs some assembly. So you always want to assemble the front end of your airbrush first. You never want to take your needle and stick it in there. You want to put on your nozzle, give it a little twist, and it should hold that pretty good. And then you're going to take your head cap, and twist that on. When you are tightening this thing up, do not use your wrench on it unless you have to. I always try to put it on hand tight.
And how would you know you would have to use a wrench?
Well, when you're using your, if you put water in here afterwards when we're going to check this, if you see bubbling coming in your bowl, or if you see any bubbling coming out of here, that means that the seal's not good here. It's not a good fit, or an air is being sucked in here and brought into your bowl. So either way, you would see some bubbling going on, and then you know that you probably have to tighten this more. And if you can't do it anymore, hand tighten, then you're going to get your wrench. But I wouldn't go real forceful on it. I would just move it just a little bit with your wrench, just to snug it up a little bit.
I've noticed that also it makes an odd noise. It'll skip. It'll go
Right.
And it sounds like a water sprinkler.
All right, and then we're going to put on our nozzle cap. Again, just finger tight, that's all that needs. And if you want to, you will be putting back on your crown cap. Then we're going to be taking your needle, which is all clean. Make sure that your chuck is loose, that's your needle chuck. You're going to slide this in, and you're going to feel it hit the front of your brush. You just want to slide that in until you feel that hit, and then you're going to tighten this down. Tighten down your chuck. And you definitely want to check at this point. You want to check, you want to pull this back, and you want to make sure that your needle is moving along with your chuck, like this is right now. If it's not tight enough, you'll notice that your chuck moves, but the needle doesn't. That will give you no paint up front because it's not moving back and letting the paint come out. So you always want to make sure that this is nice, hand tight, and that both of them work together. Now that that is done, you're going to take your cover, put that back over the top, tighten it back up. And I would probably pour some water in here and run it a couple more times just to make sure that we have a nice clean flow and no bubbles or any other issues are going to be coming along. While you're cleaning that, you also want to make sure you clean your cap. As you can see here on this one, that there's residue all around here. You want to make sure you clean that all off so you can have a good fit and finish, and everything will work great. With this particular one, as we noticed, that it had the nozzle that came out separately. This particular one, this comes from another airbrush. This one has the nozzle built into the head cap. And so you want to, it's nice that you can take this out and have access to this. And so you can take some paper towels or your little cleaning brushes. You can take your cleaning brushes and put them in there with some water and just kind of clean all the insides of that out.
The dental picks work great for that.
Dental picks work great too. We have dental pick here. You can stick that on in there, and they have different sizes. And this is, I like the dental picks because they're nice and soft. They're not abrasive like the wire ones are. And so you can clean it really well. This particular airbrush here, the head cap does not come off. And so you do not have access to your nozzle. But the best way to do that is when your needle is out, you're able to then possibly get the pick down in there and be able to work it, like you're going to have to bend it and get it down into that area and clean it the best you can. The best thing to do, though, is to make sure on these is that everything is cleaned with water to begin with. Try to clean out everything you have to be able to work all this out. And then that way you're not dragging any paint through the rest of the body. But we'll be talking more about that in a minute.
Now we're going to talk about the back of the airbrush. Why would we need to clean the back of the airbrush? Well, in this particular model, this nozzle head does not remove. So there's no way to get the paint out of that area. So when we open up the back, we're going to be pulling this needle through our dirty bucket of paint, and it's going to start landing and accumulating in this chamber here. So what we're going to do is figure out a way to make that not happen as much as possible. So how would we do that? We're going to need to clean that bowl. So you're going to clean the bowl as much as you can. You want to squirt through. You want to get as much of the residue removed as possible before you go on. You want to get down in there. This is a baby wipe. You clean out in there and get it nice and clean as much as you can. There is going to be residue because you won't be able to get in there all the way, but you can get the Q-tip in there before we get that needle removed. Try to get both sides of it and get down in there and just twirl and get as much as you can out. Then we're going to be able to take the back of the brush off. What I wanted to show you is this little screw here. You might be wondering what exactly that's for. That is to keep you from pulling your trigger back too far. So it's a kind of a trigger lock. So if you're working very tiny and you're afraid that you're going to go back really far, you can adjust this screw in the back that will allow your nozzle not to be opened up all the way. We're going to remove the back of the brush and we're going to look at the assembly here. So as we mentioned, we're going to be able to pull the needle out through and get, we're going to have to clean it. So Bob already mentioned that we want to make sure that there's nothing stuck to your thing. There's always an accumulation of paint right about where your trigger hits. And back here where there's a needle packing screw in here that has a little gasket in there. And the paint accumulates there, and it usually gets a little ridge of paint right around there. So you want to make sure you get in there, because dirty needle, we'll talk about troubleshooting another day, but a dirty needle makes your paint skip. So you want to make sure you don't have an accumulation there. So what does that leave us? That leaves us with our trigger, and then we have our packing assembly, the needle packing set. So this is called a needle chuck. This is what holds your needle on and allows, when you pull your trigger back, if it's tight, it pulls the needle with it, which is why your needle disappears when you pull back on your trigger. So you want to take out your spring guide. Why is it called a spring guide? Well, because inside there is a spring. The spring is there so that when you pull back on your trigger moves forward again. Without that, it's just going to flip-flop and nothing's going to happen when you use your airbrush. So you want to take out your spring and spring guide. Now, if you do have paint down in there, you want to make sure you don't lose this. This is so important. Put that in a safe place. But if you do start getting an accumulation, the Q-tips fit perfectly down in there. Just to mention the Q-tips, I don't use regular brand Q-tips. I use the generic brand because they don't have as much cotton on the head, and it's easier to get them in and out of the tight places that an airbrush has. So now you have your spring and your spring guide, and I'm going to put that away right in there so I know exactly where that spring is. Now we have our needle guide and our trigger. So the trigger just lays in there. You can see that it has a bar that goes through it that's going to have to be lined up later. But what you really have to know about your trigger is that on the underside, there is a groove. And that groove has to be in the back when you put it back in, because this groove is what allows your trigger to be pulled all the way back. It rests on the body of your airbrush. So that little groove right there must be in the back position when you're putting it back in. Then you remove your needle guide. That little flip has to be down, and then that pulls out. Now to clean this, you're going to get one of your little brushes, and you can get up in there with that. But that's obviously not long enough, which is why they make the long skinny brushes that come in one of these little sets. That fits up in there perfectly. You can go in from either end. There's also a really tiny one that does a better job. You get the idea. So you get up in there and you can push it all the way through, and you can get any paint out of there that you need to. This is much better when you're using something wet. So you want to pull some water in, pull in and out of there, and that should clean out that little chamber for you. Now down in here, there is where your air, when you put the, can you see it on the camera? Okay, so down in here you can see that there's the place where the trigger hits to pull the air, make the air happen. That is what gets really sticky. So there's two places where it accumulates. It accumulates straight in there, and it also accumulates in that needle packing screw that we talked about earlier. So this chamber will get full of paint if you're pulling your needle this way. So you want to make sure that you get it clean every time you clean your airbrush. So you put some water on your screw, put put some water on your Q-tip, and you want to get down in there, and this should push all the way through into that needle packing screw. And you twist it, and that will remove any residue up in there. And you can see that there was some up in there. And you just keep doing it until it comes out clean. Because to change the needle packing screw is a bear. So you don't want to do, see how it conformed to it? So I know that that went up into that hole correctly. And that pulled out all the paint that we can. The other part, you're going to go straight down and do the same thing. Do that twirl, twirl, and it's going to make it all clean out in that area where the air comes out. Of course, it's sliding around because I'm trying to make it happen. So you pull that out until it's nice and clean, and now you know that the body of your brush is now clean. So I recommend, especially when you're first learning, to take a picture of all of your pieces as you took them out. I would lay them out. It's similar to what we have in our book, because when you go to put it back together, it's going to be confusing of what piece went where did this screw, this spring go? Did this go this way or did it go this way? So you want to do it exactly as you took it out. If you don't already
you can also take a video of it, and so that way you can see yourself disassembling it and just play the video, scrub it backwards, and you can see where everything went.
Right, and unless you buy our book, Airbrushing 101, and it'll have a diagram inside.
Yep.
Ooh. Okay, so we're going to put it back together. So what would I do first? I'm going to put this trigger back in. Looking for my ledge. We're going to make sure that's in the back. We'll put it back inside and turn it sideways till you get it in there, okay? And you want to make sure that when you press down, you can hear that there is a spring also in this mechanisms down in here. This is where all your air comes in. You really shouldn't have to touch this, especially when you're cleaning it. So I see that it bounces back, so I know it's in the right position. This kind of mechanism, you want to make sure you get that little head in first, and it has to be in the certain position for it to be able to lay in there correctly and get up in there easily and come back out the top. So this pushes up against that, and that's what makes that screw happen. Then we have the screw with the spring in it. We already know that that's in there, so your spring guide goes back in till it's tight. And also, if you're having trouble with your trigger and you're thinking the paint doesn't come out fast enough or it comes out too fast, you can adjust this. And that is how much tension is put on the trigger for when you're pulling it back and forth. So if you feel like you want to make your trigger happen, just for you, so you know exactly when your paint's going to come out, that's what you would do. You would tighten that little guy up. You want to put your needle back through, and again till it's very snug, and then put on your needle chuck. And also I wanted to talk about if you're having a clog while you're painting, you can pull this out, and I don't know if you can see that, but when I pull that out, the needle disengages. You never want to snap this and go clink, 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 because what that's going to do is put pressure on that nozzle. And we've talked about it before about how nozzles flower. So if there's the nozzles, gets pushed through with the needle pushes through, it actually rolls that tip. So it stretches it out, and then you need a new nozzle. So you never, ever, ever snap this just to get a little clog out. But you can move it around, and you can also twirl your needle around to try to get that clog to move out. Then in order to finish, you just put the rest of the back and you're ready to spray again. So Bob, how do you store your airbrush?
Well, I usually try to, after I get done cleaning it all out and everything, I will actually dry it all out, let the air go through it, and then just put it in a nice safe place so you don't have to worry about it falling off a counter or something and collecting dust or something. So I usually put it back into the box possibly, or into a drawer that I know it'll be safe.
Terrific. Now that we've gone over all the different kinds of nozzle assemblies and how to clean everything, we hope that you'll be able to remember to clean out your airbrush as often as you can. Don't let it sit overnight. Don't walk away from it too much. What you'd like to do, and this is what I do, is I have these little containers for little sauces and stuff from the restaurants. They have lids, and if I'm walking away, I put rinse out and leave just the water in there, and then I come back and give this a good shake, and then I'm good to go. That's probably a really good practice to get into. You also need to flush in between color changes. Make sure that you're rinsing your brush out good, because if there's anything stuck on the needle, you will have some color shift. You want to make sure that you're always flushing in between colors.
And if you're using a solvent-based type paint, you definitely want to do exactly what we were talking about, but use the proper solvents, cleaning solvents, to do it. But just it's the same exact process. Instead of water, though, using cleaning solvents.
And from what I've been told, I don't use solvent paints, I'll be honest. The solvent paints can be left in the cup. A lot of this is probably overkill for solvents, so it's okay to walk away from your paint and leave it in your cup, because it rejuvenates once you add the reducer back to it. So it all melts back together and it should be good to go. So you're going to have to trial and error it, or talk to people who have used solvents more than we have. So with that, I say class is dismissed.